Hello and welcome. On behalf of ET HR World and Darwinbox, thank you for joining us for today's discussion. The theme for today's discussion is, in the era of generative AI, how does workplace transformation really pan out? Most organizations have a large workforce, and many a time the workforce is caught between the current work and roles that they are engaged in and the uncertainty of the future. Most organizations, according to a PwC global survey on hopes and fears, report that they are not sure as to why there is a need for change in the first place. So, given these dynamics, while we know that change is inevitable, what is it that technology can do in the evolving HR space? How can it integrate what the workplace needs, what external stakeholders need, what the boardroom needs, and finally, what internal stakeholders are asking for? How does technology become that key lever for HR leaders to help the workforce to be future ready? We have with us a few industry leaders who will help us to understand strategies for employee engagement, how to be future ready, and how AI and automation technologies can help us walk into the future seamlessly. Joining us on this discussion are Vijayshankar Ananthanarayanan, who is the VP and Global Head Transformation at Darwinbox, Vikrant Gupta, who is the CHRO at Wipro Enterprises, and Ajay Kumar, who is the CHRO at Continental AG Corp. Hello and welcome to all the panelists. Thank you for joining us today. Ajay, I would like to start off with you here. So given the dynamic, shift, and the rapid change in the way workforce is being seen today, how do you really balance, the changing dynamics in the workforce? And how do you really see workforce or workplace transformation as something that you need to balance while keeping them engaged and also keeping them future ready for future roles? So how do you really see this?
Thanks, Shantali. It's an interesting question. So first of all, thank you for having me. The topic is quite interesting, and especially connecting with the industry leaders, both Vikrant and Vijay. In my perspective, there are two dimensions to this particular topic. One is the transformation. Second one is how do we embrace that? If I were to look at the transformation piece in separate, what the industry is experiencing today is not just a change in isolation or transformation in separate. Rather, it's a tsunami of transformation, continuous. It is not going to end anywhere because the world is changing. And then largely, this is driven by one fundamental fact that what I wish to call it as all the stakeholders of business are happily dissatisfied. If I double click on that, what I said, typically, there are 5 stakeholders, irrespective of the domain, irrespective of the nature of business, what you are into. There is an investor who funds for your business. He or she is unhappy for the simple reason that they are looking for more dividend, more appreciation on the capital invested for your business. Second, there is a customer who expect more value for their price which they are offering to you. Third one is the supplier who is expecting more price for their output, which is an input for your business. And the fourth aspect is the employees, not in any specific order, employees who want more salary, more compensation, more benefits, right? And the fifth important stakeholder is the ecosystem partner, including the government authorities and so on, who want more tax on time, etc. So every entrepreneur is actually chasing this dissatisfied stakeholder community, and then how do you create more returns for them? Only by making yourself more efficient, more effective. And then that is possible by identifying where all you have opportunities to refine your process, improve your efforts towards better results by reducing the speed and controlling the cost. Now, coming to this particular topic in terms of how do you balance between your current responsibilities while keeping yourself ready for future, it comes from the fact that there is an interesting say that what you always did if you continue to do what you always did, you will end up in getting the same thing. But that is not enough for the stakeholder community, what I just briefed. It means that you have to really drive change in the mindset of the across the organization, because organizational mindset is a sum total of individual mindset of all employees. So how do you transform that? And then that will be largely influenced by two factors, in my view. One is the skill part of it, the ability to perform the job, current or future. The next aspect is the will, the skill and will combination, which in my view is just like two wheels in a bike. A combination, one alone cannot drive towards future, towards progression, but rather a right combination of both aspects. To that extent, I would say that if you want to drive that skill will towards future without compromising on the current responsibility, or rather I would say do that best. And also, while keeping yourself upgraded, up to date for future, you need to have organizational transformation through rather institutionalizing 3 or 4 principle. One is that every individual in the organization should be considered as a partner in this success. So communicate. Why are we doing this kind of a transformation? Why are we embracing this kind of a change? That communication has to happen. And more communication means more transparency that will lead to trust. That partnership is created and cemented further. Second aspect is that continuous feedback. Feedback more in terms of, I would say, not necessarily only to look back, but in terms of feed forward, in the sense one is that how well we are doing, you are doing, I am doing, vis-a-vis how we can improvise it further. So feed forward, sometimes look through them when we drive the vehicle, because I am from automotive business. So when you drive, you have to look at the rear mirror while not distracting attention from the windshield, right? So a combination of both skill and will is something which can be achieved by communication as well as continuous feedback. And third principle is to embrace the way of continuous learning. In the sense, there is no escape. There is no escape from that opportunity, saying that if you don't learn, there is a certain degree of redundancy which is getting created for the person, position, as well as process, right? And the fourth aspect is in terms of collective collaboration. So all these elements put together, I think organization can bring this movement together towards embracing the change. And your key element, how do we balance between current capabilities as well as our getting ready for future, is in the right, has to be managed, orchestrated in the right context of bringing employees together, the need for that, and then making sure that all the employees are together towards in this journey further.
So thanks for that insight, Ajay. So calling you into the discussion, Vikrant, Ajay very kind of set the context in terms of bringing out the 4 pillars of transformation, from his organization standpoint. Generative AI now is clearly the flavor of the season, right? So we do see there's a massive discussion and discourse around it, and consumption and piloting also at various levels across industries. Now, how do you really see it impacting the HR function, and how are you viewing it? How are you looking at it as a collaborative tool or a technology that can really take your, mandate forward?
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me here. Lovely to be sitting with colleagues like this. But I think it's a very interesting question. It's a very powerful question. It's a highly debated question. Look, in my view, this is here to stay. If somebody believes it in any other shape and form, is just fooling themselves, right? I think there's been a lot of debates about Gen AI and whether it's going to take away jobs or not. I strongly believe in Darwin's theory of evolution. Humankind has survived. It'll find its way to survive. Having said that, I think the challenge and the beauty of this whole transformation is going to be, are we as professionals going to be able to learn how to work with Gen AI and the tools and use the power to finally add more and more value to us as professionals and to the ecosystem that we serve and work for, organization, employees. So I think that to me is the crux. Having said that, I'd like to answer this question in 4 different parts, right? So one, we're already seeing the impact of Gen AI on the function, HR specifically as a function, right? I mean, whether you talk about recruiting and its screening capabilities, when you look at internal deployment in large IT services companies with respect to demand matching, you look at analytics. It's moving to predictive analytics, attrition prediction, sentiment analysis, probable career pathing. All these tools are already getting impacted, right? Personalized onboarding, virtual learning, you can go on and on. So is there opportunity for Gen AI to really take the function to the next level? It's already happening. It's already in pilot cases, and many organizations are at advanced stages of using these cases, right? That's part one. So the impact is absolutely there. As you look at this question, the other parts, I think all of this is going to come to light only and only at an enterprise level if you have a very strong digital infrastructure. As we talk about, there's a startup ecosystem, which is largely on Excel sheets. Many evolved organizations still work on disparate, dissociated, non-integrated systems, standalone systems, right? So there has to be a concentrated effort to build a solid digital infrastructure. Otherwise, the power of something that the Gen AI can bring to life will not be felt, right? So that's part two. Part three is then what happens to the function and the profession in the function, right? Of course, we know a lot of tasks around document management, policy, query handling now does get automated. It gets into self-service mode, right? I think it's a huge opportunity for HR professionals to repurpose and reskill themselves. There is a, my favorite example is we used to stand in lines in banks to withdraw cash, and suddenly overnight we just do everything on a mobile, right? I think that sort of adoption has to happen to the HR function. So it's an opportunity for us as professionals to reskill ourselves. So the ones that will die are not the ones that are, it's not because of Gen AI. Or the tools associated with. The ones that will not survive are the ones who don't pick up new capabilities, new ways of doing the same function, adding more value, right? So that's on the HR function. And I think lastly, as a community, as an ecosystem, we need to be aware that while there are lots and lots of advantages of Gen AI, I think there are also risks, right? How do we make sure that we are responsible when it comes to using generative AI? How do we make sure that the biases that could go into the whole modeling ecosystem are taken care of, right? So are we testing it enough? Are we, broad basing our test and use cases to be a lot more inclusive? I think these are very, very important. Otherwise, the color could look very, very different. So, that's my spiel. It's a massive, to summarize, I think there's a very big impact on Gen AI. People need to wake up and smell the coffee if they've not already done it. It's also a massive opportunity for us as HR professionals to really relook at how we engage with employees from a career perspective, from shaping the workforce. These are opportunities that comes to us because a lot of the transactional work is now probably not needed to be done by HR professionals. We can really up-level and upskill. And I think lastly, being more responsible in how we use this is going to define how future generations get impacted. So thank you. I mean, that's just my 2 bits on this.
Excellent. I mean, you kind of aptly summed up, what the kind of trend that generative AI is taking at this point of time. So, Vijay, if I may ask you, so we heard from Vikrant and we heard from Ajay as well that they are on different journeys at this point of time from a workplace standpoint. Uh, while transformation is an ongoing process, technology definitely becomes the bulwark. So, how does an HR platform help to optimize this entire balance between innovation and agility, basically between lights on and being future ready? So, your take on this?
Thank you for having me, and great to be with peers from such respected organizations as Continental and Wipro. And thank you, Vikrant, for the segue into Darwin, because it was from he is our named father in some sense, and his focus on continuous evolution while focusing on empowering the last mile employee was what we thought of as the basis for our existence as Darwinbox back in 2015. So thank you for that kind indication straight up. Coming to your question, Shantari, the way I think we could approach this is to understand when we look at agility and innovation. Look at 3 levels really, right? Take the view from a leadership perspective, take a view from the manager perspective, and take a view from the last mile employee perspective. The needs or the determinants of agility actually are different, while obviously they are all getting aligned to one outcome. As you called out, right at the top, every organization wants to run the business and change the business. And there is this delicate interplay which is always on, and it's an interesting creative tension. What does this mean in terms of both agility, opportunities, and hotspots for leadership? They need to ensure that they're able to, as Ajay said, do more with less, because it's not like the change the business is necessarily going to generate outcomes immediately, but at the same time, you need investments of people, of resources, of thought to actually think about and execute, prototype, and then go through that cycle of what I would call start, scale, and soar, right, in some sense. But that means that very often the traditional views of the organization also have to be revisited. You may need to bring together teams which are breaking past the traditional definition of your org structures, cross-functional teams, special pods, for example, which may challenge the conventional view of an org structure, first of all. You may need to create teams that don't just work within the confines of your org structure, but maybe with partners from outside the org as well, right? To come up with new ideas and prototype them and take them to what could be. So from a tech perspective, we need effectively the ability to have multiple subcultures and many organizations in one, and very different views enabled in terms of how we traditionally look at operational aspects such as reporting. So an employee at a point in time may have a people manager, may have a dotted line reportee as part of a matrix organization, and also maybe project managers based on projects or pods that they are mapped to, right? So starting from some of those basic elements through to saying, while maintaining the fabric of the overall organization, how do you enable some of these experimental models at scale to propagate and thrive without disturbing what you would expect from the stability of running an organization through a system, right? The second piece, so how do you then look at roles? How do you look at an assignment approach to an employee, saying that you're doing a certain role by day, but some parts of your day are also dedicated to something else? How does the system enable things like those? The other piece for leaders is that whatever changes or transformations they're trying to bring, they want to ensure that it has minimal impact on business continuity, right? So that's the other ask, where I don't want a ton of disruption in terms of a pain of change, a cost of change. So all this can go on, but I'd expect things to go on almost as if it's seamless, right? So from a tech perspective, we again need the ability for changes to happen with a lot more agility. So if we are moving from a traditional org structure, for example, we're bringing in an M&A, we've made an acqui-hire, we want to tuck that in. We want those synergies as leadership to manifest very quickly, but we want it with minimal disruption. And we also need flexibility, because we may say, I want this organization at arm's length for a while. I want part of the organization to get co-opted within this period, but then I want a full assimilation by this time. And by the way, I don't want any of this to cause any disruption. So then our system's actually able to enable this kind of combination of organic and inorganic growth with the flexibility and the seamlessness that's required. So this is two. And third, I think more than anything else, at leadership levels, people expect reliable, close to real-time data, basis which they can pivot and take decisions, right? So to Vikrant's point, where you have a situation where you have disaggregated systems, legacy, new age, homegrown, third party, all of those coexisting, how does the role of HR tech potentially come to play to say, relax, we've got this, we'll give you the layer by which you don't have to bother about what's below that layer, but we'll find a way to synthesize, make the connections, and give you one view of reliable data and close to real-time data if possible, or real-time ideally, basis which you're able to size things up and move from there. Now moving to the second constituent here, which is the manager. During and post-COVID, I'd say this is possibly the role in an organization that's been disintermediated the most. What all has happened? You've got now managers having to deliver outcomes, the more with less conundrum that Anil called out. Spans are expected to increase now, where you had an expected span of say 1:6, 1:8 being a good span. People are expecting that with hybrid teams, virtual teams, technology supported teams, because the whole premise of bringing in technology also is that managers should be able to do more with less, and employees should be able to do more with tech and less with supervision, right? So if that is the case, you're talking about a far higher span having to be managed, far more complexity in that span, because it's not just scale of headcount supervised, but variety, hybrid, and still getting work done. So the risks are going up, the constraints are higher, but the outcomes expected are only going up as well, right? So managers then need much more support from tech in terms of not having to go back to their notes to be reminded of things. And it could start from simple things like being reminded about birthdays and anniversaries, through to when this person's next feedback check-in was supposed to happen. Because yes, you want continuity in feedback, you want a more cyclical versus a event-based approach to how teams are managed. And in a larger span, you also need guidance from a system to say, I have X number of people reporting to me, where do I need to disproportionately devote my time? Who are my attrition risks? Where do I have a greater chance of this person's exit hurting my day-to-day business continuity or operational continuity that much more? Where are my engagement indices playing out in the context of my team? Which areas do I need to work on? So while HR gets freed up with all of the new age tech with greater ESS, MSS support and whatnot, this partnership that is to happen, and we came out of the thought leadership with Deloitte about a year and a half ago, which was called Manager is the New HR. Right? Because in terms of people management, so much more is now available with the manager. So manager hubs through which the unified insights of a team can come together to help managers manage that much faster, work that much more meaningfully with their teams. And third part is the last mile employee or the front line, right? There is tremendous possibility here because you want to first of all make sure that they're as independent as possible, as enabled as possible, as informed as possible with what's relevant for them, right? So the chatbots and the digital assistants that are available to them, ideally mobile first, which give them what they need, not just in terms of an overall view of the organizational policies, but what's relevant to them, their role, their location, their line of work. How much can they do where their productivity is minimally affected? So in the context of, say, folks on field, days in field, how can they be maximized? I don't need to come back to an office to file my expenses. I don't need to come in and put my fingerprint on a biometric to indicate my attendance. Can they pretty much do facial recognition or geotagging or geofencing to clock in wherever they are on the field? Can they file their expenses by just scanning and uploading an expense receipt? And by the way, can the system be smart enough to check when there is malfeasance and warn them about the fact that, hey, you're putting in something which is probably not relevant or valid for you as per policy or whatever else? So how much more can they be enabled? And to the point Anil mentioned on constant communication and listening, going back to the almost good old days of quality circles from shop floors or the feedback and the feed forward from the field back to the leadership, if those channels are available, either through interest groups or communication channels, there is also tremendous power in terms of agility because these are the people who are closest to the market on ground, customers on ground. So what can they send back as inputs? In addition to the general vibes of we're feeling okay, how are you feeling today? This is what we're seeing customers doing on ground. This is how competition is moving. If that's also created as a channel where people can engage back with the org, it creates a tremendous ability to drive agility based on proximity to the ground. So just three levels of the org, managers, and the employees, where we can bring this blend of innovation and agility together to actually make this work as a flywheel which is reinforcing.
Excellent point. And this whole thing of the manager being the new HR, I think that's an interesting dynamic that's actually come through. A lot rests with the manager, actually. Great points, Vijay. So would like to quickly understand from each of us here, and Ajay, I'll start with you. Given the fact that HR tech is taking off, and there are many systems, as was rightly pointed out by the panel earlier as well. There are many systems that really sometimes talk to each other, sometimes don't talk to each other. What are those critical success factors that you see in terms of an impact or in terms of adoption of technology, especially in the HR function, that really kind of drive workplace transformation that you have seen, or trends that you've seen and in your experience? If you could share a couple of critical success factors, that would be great here.
I think that's also quite interesting question. I think I would like to connect with where Vijay concluded that every line manager has to be a HR manager. That is one success story. But expecting a line manager to behave, perform, act, think, smile, talk like an HR manager will remain to be an aspiration if we are not providing that kind of an internal, system support or the ecosystem support. It's not going to be a big success. To that extent, I would say that, in addition to that, Vijay also said the span of control, or rather span of influence, is becoming wider, bigger, larger. So that also requires, otherwise it will be too heavy pressure on every line manager to perform much beyond what was expected of him or her. So that is one aspect. Second aspect is the technological changes, whatever is happening or has to happen to increase the overall, so to say, to reach that kind of a destination of organizational excellence, to score customer delight. In my view, one very clearly possible vehicle is more automation, more technology enablement, and coupled with adequate, so to say, trust level on the employees that all these changes are for good, aiming towards getting better or to make better version of each one of us. Maybe I can give an example. I mean, a use case from our organization, Continental. Ours is a 152-year-old startup. I still want to call it as a startup for the simple reason that we can't live on our legacy of the past. Okay, so whatever we have done, if we continue to be a slave of our past, 152 years, 2 world wars, so many recessions we have survived, we are only making ourselves complacent. But that is not going to be taking ourselves to the future. So it means that we have to be behaving like a startup. What is startup? The most important element is the speed, time to respond through agility, reducing the response time, and then embracing the change in quick speed. And one element which we found out was that when we have a large organization like this together, spread across 56 countries with 200,000 employees, are we given that kind of freedom to act or freedom to pick their choice at their will, right? How do you, when Vijay said that manager is the connecting point between customer and the real capabilities of the organization, managers also are under pressure to make sure that their team members are adequately motivated, engaged with the workplace, and then give their best, right? So at times, not that every single manager has arrived. Okay, there is a certain degree of a disconnection between, for whatever reasons. We found out a way saying that if there is a dissatisfaction between a team member on the manager, the employee should be having that freedom to change the job without changing the company. Change your job without changing the company, duly supported by internal system, right? So we have internalized a system called ITJM, Internal Talent and Job Market, where every single opportunity, career opportunity or job opportunity which we have in the company should be mandatorily should be published and accessible to all the 200,000 of employees. And then anyone can apply at their will as long as they have some service conditions fulfilled. For example, 18 months of service in their current role, they are free to go. There is no need of a formal approval or, so to say, alignment which is required with the manager. As long as he or she fulfills the future positions, free to go. So that puts certain degree of I have the freedom to move at my will kind of a mindset, and then getting always ready for future. Right? So technology supported, mindset supported, and then that also put additional accountability onto the manager, saying that you have to be caring, authentic, and genuine manager for your team. While there is an increase in the span, but you have to be giving personalized attention to each of your team member to make sure that you are accepted and you are being considered not as a supervising manager, but as a leader. So we have a business case in terms of what is our aspirational growth plan for the next 5 years. The leadership team came together and then created a plan that in the next 5 years' time, we should reach 3x of our current financial number. So top line, especially, for example, X billion euro by 2028, and then by achieving X percentage of EBIT and 20% of ROC, without increasing the headcount. So it means that what we earlier discussed, more has to be, every single person should be contributing by enabling him or her to contribute more. So that typically what we say, every single person there is something called normal efforts, then the elevated extra efforts, and discretionary efforts. If you really want to unlock that discretionary efforts, the person has to be motivated, person has to be enabled, and then a right combination of these two elements will make sure that they contribute to above and beyond. Every single person, if they are able to be exceptional performers, understanding the purpose of our being together, and then if it is supported, and then while we can say that this is quite possible, it is not that easy because we are talking about 3x while retaining the headcount as is. So we institutionalize a program called Growth Mindset, instead of just coining it as a learning culture, etc., which everybody talks. And then is it good? Good. But is it good enough? Not enough. Because we are talking about multiplication of our revenue numbers. So therefore, what we have decided is that go a little deeper in terms of what will make a person to say that I have growth mindset inside in me. So we identified 4 or 5 aspects. Every single employee will have to have a reflection by himself or herself, with or without the support of or supervision of the manager. That is, choice is left to the employee. That am I having tick on all the 4 or 5 boxes? For example, am I having future focus adequately? Am I having the learning mindset? Do I demonstrate that collaboration mindset, or do I have the customer orientation, and then the leading towards change? Okay, so if there is any of these boxes is unticked, the person is advised to create a development plan to make sure that that particular weakness is neutralized or converted as strength. And then for that, we have, it is not that identifying of a problem is the end, rather it is the end of the beginning. Thereafter, there are a host of opportunities wins inside the companies provided. For example, we have something called Software Academy, Engineering and System Academy, where I would say most of the, for example, the artificial intelligence onwards, all the training modules are available at click of a button. So employees can learn at their will while on the move. And then similarly, our idea is that every single employee should be educated or trained in AI technique, irrespective of whether he or she is directly working on. So we are trying to create that kind of an ecosystem inside the company where the need for training is adequately communicated, convinced to the employees, and then the support system is provided.
Very interesting points, and I allude to your earlier point about the decentralization of the lateral move that an employee can make. That's like a lot of empowerment that comes at the hands of an individual employee, right? So does this happen very seamlessly?
See, as a culture, yes, I think we have institutionalized that, internalized that, and then in the earlier past, such kind of movement was not as smooth as what we are seeing today. It is changing. It is happening good for the time being.
I think it's quite a game changer, putting power into the hands of the individual employee. So, Vikrant, if I may ask you, what are those couple of factors, success factors that you see which is powered by tech in the HR function?
So, if I answer your question correctly, what you're asking me is, what are the critical decision-making parameters when you're looking at defining your HR tech journey, choosing your vendor, right?
Yes.
So first, I just want to, at least demystify, the HR tech journey hasn't begun today. It's been around for many years, right? Any mid-size organization today, any large-scale organization today would have some sort of a system in place, if not the most advanced, but maybe homegrown systems, maybe bespoke systems would definitely have something or the other. So that's really the starting base, right? And I look at this from a couple of different perspectives. So one, the world has changed, organizations have evolved, workforce coming into organizations have different drivers, age profiles are changing. It's a pretty good mix out there with, baby boomers, Gen Zs, Gen X, whatever names you want to call it, but it's a really nice, healthy mix, right? And that's driving some of the accelerated pace at which the organizations now need to start adopting more new age technology, right? So with that context set, I think for me, there are 2 or 3 different stakeholders, and hence the parameters for decision making, I'd like to divide them into these 3 categories, right? So the first one really is the employee, right? At the end of the day, from an HR tech perspective, I think sitting in the decision-making seat, I would definitely want to make sure the tools that we are bringing in, the journeys that we are embarking on, are they adding to the experience, value-added experience of the employee? Am I getting the employee whatever he or she needs in maybe 2 or 3 clicks at best, right? Is it enabling their, more empowerment with more legit data into their hands to take decisions on their own careers, as was just spoken about in terms of career mobility and stuff. So that's the first part, right? The second constitution is the HR organization by itself, right? I think from there, I would say as a functional leader, some of the things that were very important for me would be, one, it's not just implementing any tech. Am I fundamentally being able to change Or is the technology or the tool also helping me change some of the underlying processes to make it best practices? If I have a Fiat engine, and even if I put it on a Merc body, it's still going to run at the pace of Fiat, right? So do I have the processes? Am I are the tools enabling me to bring in best practices, bring in more outside in view? Is going to be the most important piece to me, right? And of course, as a functional resource, am I making the life of my HR folks a lot more easier? Are there patches available for mass upload, downloads, reports at a click? Can I use more BI tools to pull through my reports the way I want to, etc.? Those are some of the parameters I would look at, right? And then from a leadership perspective, right, the CFO, CIO, CHRO, I think sitting in that room or on that decision, I would look at broadly two things. One, finally going through all this transformation change, what is the ROI that I'm getting, right? How do I quantify the ROI? So is there a valid, legit business case, right? We don't want to do things for the sake of doing things, right? It has to have a business impact. Anything and everything that you do has to fit into the P&L somewhere, right? And the second parameter for me, I think, on that decision table would be what's the total cost of ownership. The reason I say this is because I started by saying that, look, a lot of organizations, this is not a journey that started today. Organizations have been at it, right? Evolution happens. Organizations have become more complex. Hybrid workforces, distributed work environments, hub and spoke models. You're sitting out in geographies, with few headcount, right? Maybe 10 in Switzerland, maybe 15 in Malaysia, right? So how do you bring all of that systematically? Do you have the right ecosystem to support? Do you have the tools that you're choosing? Is that going to be giving you a longer shelf life because the technology is changing? So the total cost of ownership is going to be extremely important, right? So those are the three constituencies, right? Employee, HR, and leadership. And I just shared some of the decision-making parameters, at least that I think are important. I'll give you a very example in our organization what we did. So we were struggling. I wouldn't say struggling. Our aim was, look, can we sell more effectively, right? Now, for a lot of people who know Wipro Enterprises, FMCG part of the business, obviously we have a lot of personal care, soaps, etc. that we sell. Now we have a large workforce, distributed workforce, tier 2, tier 3 cities, right? And a lot of our business comes to general trade, which is the small mom and pop shows. Of course, we do have a lot of business in the modern trade as well, but look at tier 2, tier 3 cities, small cities. Now, how do we equip our salespeople? And this is where we went in to look at technology to solve the problem, right? Invested a lot of money, a lot of man hours, a lot of leadership bandwidth. And today, every single salesperson in the street will have a defined route saying this is the most optimized route for you to go to cover the maximum in your during work. Not only that, we have data now, historical data, market intelligence, by region, right, geofenced or, for that particular pin code, right, to say, hey, look, these are the product types at the price points that sell more often in this area. And hence, because you're going to these stores, because you have historical data for these stores, these are what you should recommend as an offering to buy to that particular store. So we got that intelligent. Now, did it require a huge amount of effort to bring in that technology and mindset shift? Yes. But it was only because there was a strong business case, there was a strong ROI, and we all felt that it would help, the organization move forward in its journey to sell more effectively, right? So I think those are the points that I was trying to say, that the business case for me at the end of the day is extremely important, irrespective whether it's sales or finance or HR, technology transformation.
Correct. And it's also interesting how these overlaps, between sales and HR, not resting, because it, kind of alludes to the field force, right? So very interesting example that you gave in. And it also kind of maybe shows the kind of effort, the amount of data that you had to bring in, the amount of right data that you had to bring in, cleaning of that data would have also been a very massive exercise.
If I may add, most organizations have the data. They just don't know how to stitch it together. They don't know where it is lying because it's all so much in disparate systems. So you need an ecosystem that can pull the data together and make intelligent use of that data, right? We're not struggling for data. In fact, if anything else, I think we have an overload of data.
Excellent. Yes. So, Vijay, Ajay brought in, a sort of very interesting dimension in terms of, empowerment of the individual employee. And Vikrant brought in an interesting aspect of empowering the last mile, field force employee. And tech has been the bulwark of these transformational projects that, or business cases that they really articulated just now. What in your mind kind of resonates in your conversations with the industry and with HR leaders as you see it? What are some of those critical factors, top of the mind, some 3 or 4 factors that HR leaders or the ecosystem has to look at in order to have an integrated or a well-knitted transformational outlook for the future?
From a tech perspective, as we see ourselves as enablers of, I wouldn't just say HR transformation, but org transformation, right? Because ultimately, as much as you could lay a blueprint out for sales improvement, ops improvement of any kind, it has to be delivered through the people. The second piece being that if we are bringing in more of Gen AI and related use cases, and somewhere to the point Ajay made, trying to grow something like 3x, but with pretty much the same headcount. What you would then look to empower this retained headcount with has to be also commensurate to drive that kind of nonlinearity, right? So I think the key pieces are to second what Vikrant called out. I think you need to start with a view of what you're trying to achieve and helping, because there could be 20 possibilities. I think it's about sharply orienting down to 1 or 2 things which everyone can rally around, which is a good enough burning platform, and stitching that value case together. Second is to take a view of when he spoke of TCO, right, and a total cost of ownership, and a sort of embedded element there is going beyond just the what you could call direct cost view of a system, and look at the iceberg kind of a model, right? Because the portion below the water actually is where the interesting stuff came out. I was just on my way in looking at a podcast which talk about the fact that a tree grows 2 ways. There's a gravitopic orientation which is further down, which is the root, and there's a phototropic orientation which is going up, which is the fruit, right? And interestingly enough, the struggle that happens when it's damp, where it's dark, where it's smelly, is where the seed actually finds its roots and builds that foundation, breaks through the soil, and then what comes through is actually with lesser resistance, but with more of the art of the possible in terms of where you can reach, right? The part which very often gets somewhere missed is the fact that you have to put that hard effort below the ground first up. A lot of what's manifest and comes through in, say, case studies, etc., is very often oblivious almost to what kind of work goes in to get this part done. And the biggest considerations there are having clarity, having a resilience, because these journeys are never straight and narrow. They are interesting journeys. But then having the ability to then bring in technology which is able to complement this kind of a reality, meaning you need flexibility, you need modularity, you need the ability to unify with flexibility and modernize. You need an innovation velocity that is able to keep pace with the fact that not everything is available right now, but it's available by the time you need it and you need to, say, go live or get to a certain milestone from a business perspective. You may have technologies which are not necessarily ready for, to Vikrant's point, all 100 geographies that a mega enterprise may be operating in. But then are the fundamental frameworks in place which are scalable? Because no technology is by itself going to be ready for everything. But is there scalability? Is there a certain fundamental element of the ability of the architecture to unify, integrate, be extensible? No technology can be adopted in situ by an enterprise. So then what's the flexibility that you're providing in terms of endpoint customization without burning a hole in the pocket? Because the ecosystem has somewhere unfortunately been geared up to promote a change request economy, right? In many ways, saying give as much as is required from a minimal product, and then we'll figure out what is to be done. But then create a sort of parallel economy in some sense almost. So we've made a deliberate effort, for example, to try and see how we can transfer the power back to the people who have to use the system at scale. Because that is when people believe that the system is a partner for them rather than something that they're dependent on, right? So if it moves from dependence to partnership, and then the ecosystem is curated, and the data is brought together in terms of insights, and the data is democratized, right? The other piece is that when all of this insight comes in, very often it becomes under the purview of a limited audience in the org. And it doesn't necessarily go to the pockets where they can actually work with it and use it as well as they need to. So to the point he mentioned on the last mile, the power is really in that democratized view of data going in, which actually enables them in the decisions that matter the most to them. So I believe that technology, first of all, has to help enable clarity and provide a systematic approach to unlocking or clarifying value. Second, doing that hard gravitopic sort of work in terms of tying things up and getting the roots ready. And then working more with a view of democratizing, empowering versus creating dependence. And having the innovation velocity and scalability by which whatever is new is being brought in with some velocity. And at the same time, it's scalable and safe in the context of compliance, attending to multiple geographies, and the constructs of managing headcount increases and all of the other pieces.
Excellent. So I see that, empowerment as a theme that came across, in the last part of the discussion, where we kind of give back power to teams, to individual employees, and to organizations at various levels, so that hierarchies, become flexible. Data is democratized, which means it gives power for decision making at every level. So interesting times, interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining us on this discussion today and sharing your insights. So thank you so much, Ajay. Thank you, Vikrant, and thank you, Vijay, for being a part of this discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.